All right, let's go ahead and get started if we could. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Can we start with the roll call, please?
Mayor Bagley.
Here.
Council members Christensen. Here. Finley. Here. Martin. Here. Peck. Rodriguez. Here. Waters. Mayor, you have a quorum?
All right, great. Let's say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Anybody have any motions or anything to direct city staff? Glad to see that there's none.
I do.
Okay, Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I noticed that Sam Mamet is retiring from CML, and I would like for us, if everyone is in agreement, to send him a thanks for your service letter for all the years of service that he gave to the cities all across Colorado.
Do we have consensus to do that? Yes. All right. Harold, you have your direction. If you guys could please prepare that. Thank you. All right, let's move on to public invited to be heard. It's a study session, so please make sure that your name is on the list. We have a lot of folks, it looks like, eager to participate in our democratic process once more. So if you haven't gotten on the list, you won't be able to speak tonight because it's a study session unless you get up here like within the next 30 seconds. All right, but let's go ahead and start. Actually, no. Special reports? Anything?
No report, Mayor, Council.
All right. Then let's go ahead and move on to public invited to be heard. Can we start with Susan Summers?
Hi. Better put these on, I won't be able to read. Susan Summers, 1418 Galilee Lane, Longmont. Mayor and council members. As you are aware, prairie dog advocates have been working tirelessly to find relocation sites for Longmont's prairie dogs. With the help of city staff, David Bell and Dan Wolford, we have identified a site here in Longmont. Colorado Parks and Wildlife has already reviewed this parcel and deemed it suitable habitat for up to 60 prairie dogs. The Brickstone prairie dogs, who are the survivors of the Great Western Flex poisoning that we all know about that happened in November of last year, are perfect candidates for this relocation site. We believe there to be 25 to 30 prairie dogs surviving on this parcel that's now in the development application review. To our knowledge, the developer of the Brickstone has not started his good faith effort, even though he actually started talking to the city back in January. To our knowledge, he hasn't contacted anyone looking for relocation sites. And as we know, that's required under the current city law that he make a good faith effort to relocate. We would like to ask council to take whatever action they can to ensure that the prairie dogs are relocated to this parcel that we've just identified. Time is a critical element here. We're getting into winter. We're running out of time that we're able to actually move these prairie dogs. Prairie dog advocates have clearly stepped up to the challenge of finding a relocation site. We have gone above and beyond doing the work that really should have been done by the developer. The city has a legal, ethical, and moral responsibility to ensure that this time the developer of the parcel follows the law and applies to relocate the surviving prairie dogs to this now identified parcel. And just to clarify, as we all know, there's never a guarantee that something like this will work. A lot of it is up to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. But given that we know there is a site and that this guy has the prairie dogs that will fit onto this parcel, we see no reason why he shouldn't be required to actually apply to Colorado Parks and Wildlife and let this process play out and see if they can approve this relocation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Summers. Jeremy Gregory.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity. Jeremy Gregory, 238 Sweet Valley Court in Longmont. There was a letter that Susan and I sent a few weeks ago. Just kind of want to go over that real quick. As we approach the first reading of the proposed prairie dog ordinance, there are 5 critical points we would like to have included in the language, as we'll establish an equitable, socially responsible policy moving forward. Number 1, it is imperative that a 90-day public comment period be established when a development is to commence where there are prairie dogs on said land. 2, it is crucial that the option for a 60 to 90-day delay be made available should there be a receiving site located, yet more time needed to perform such relocation. This would be rare, but there is precedence to support the need to implement this clause. 3, as supported by many city council members, a $1,500 per acre wildlife habitat loss fee be included in this ordinance for those who use means of extermination other than carbon monoxide. This money, as suggested, could be earmarked for open space to pay for future prairie dog relocation, as well as to cover barrier fencing, etc. 4, we strongly implore council to use the active burrow count, 10 being the threshold, rather than acreage for several reasons, 1 being it's easier and more efficient. And 5, we ask that city remove any language allowing donation to any raptor rehabilitation programs as an option for landowners or developers for several reasons. Prairie dogs are often inhumanely treated, left in cages in extreme or inclement weather, as recently witnessed in Lafayette prior to being inhumanely killed with carbon dioxide. The American Veterinary and Medical Association places very strict guidelines for the administration of carbon dioxide to be considered humane, and it just makes absolutely no sense to remove a keystone species from their natural habitat to be fed to raptors who will require this very keystone species to survive once released back into the wild. This program is simply a greenwashed attempt to absolve one of inhumane behavior. It's a broken form of logic and is unprincipled. I am also here in solidarity with the group Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek and their advocates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Anna Rivas.
Hi, I'm Anna Rivas, 4501 Nelson Road, and I'm also here in support of the Brickstone Prairie Dogs. Since a suitable relocation site has been identified, there is no justification for the developer to instead simply kill the prairie dogs. To kill them instead of relocating at this point can only be interpreted as an act of contempt, disdain, heartlessness, spite, callousness towards both the citizens who are advocating for them and for the prairie dogs themselves, and to the city. Under these circumstances, to allow the developer to get away with trampling the existing code would be a black eye on our fair city, and it should not be allowed to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rivas. Kat Bradley Bennett.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Kat Bradley Bennett, 5914 Blue Mountain Circle, and I'm here to support a 150-foot setback along the St. Vrain as it goes through Longmont. The St. Vrain is a corridor, and wildlife uses it, and uses it a lot. Streams and wetlands are probably the most productive ecosystems on the planet, and we've lost a lot of those in Boulder County. The St. Vrain is a stopover for migrating waterfowl, migrating songbirds, and it provides year-round habitat for birds that are here year-round, including waterfowl and songbirds, hawks, woodpeckers. These birds are here because they find food and they have a good place to live, just like we are. We know that there are mink along the St. Vrain, but now we also know, from last year, we know that we've got otters. Otters disappeared in the state 100 years ago. Shortly after I graduated from college, and I know this dates me, but that was more than 40 years ago, Colorado started trying to reintroduce otters. Just as birds are indicator species for a healthy environment, otters are an indicator species for a healthy river. They're very susceptible to pollution, and they don't do well with the encroachment of development. But a river otter was seen and confirmed out at Golden Ponds last year. So let's listen to our lessons from 2013. We are in a unique position here in Longmont. A setback would help protect future development from the ravages of floods, and we also have the opportunity to preserve this really rich wildlife habitat. Boulder doesn't have that, but we could. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley Bennett. Kimberly Gibbs.
evening, Mayor Bagley and members of council. My name is Kim Gibbs. I live at 7468 Mount Sherman Road in Gun Barrel. I'd like to speak about the airport budget. As someone whose home and other real estate property in Boulder County is negatively affected by the Longmont Airport, I am requesting that the city move toward a self-sufficient funding model. This model would account for operating expenses as well as capital expenditures that are currently funded by federal and state taxpayer subsidies. Additionally, I am requesting that you adjust the airport budget to reflect the cost of installing pollution monitoring equipment, especially under the skydiving flight box. That would include noise monitoring as well as exhaust emissions from, for example, leaded aviation fuel. How could you move toward that self-sufficient budget? First of all, you could collect fees that you are entitled to collecting, like the skydiving drop zone fees that we talked about last week. For many years, the South Parcel lease, which was a $40,000 plus per year lease for Mile High skydiving, was not collected. Okay, so collect the fees that you're entitled to. Secondly, you can adopt landing fees based on aircraft weight. The FAA has said that you can do that. It's fair. It's fair to ask the airport users to actually pay their own way and to pay for the airport expenses. Finally, say no to airport expansion and forego future federal grant monies. That is really the key toward restoring local control over aviation noise regulations and finally putting us on a path to peace and harmony between that airport and the people who live here and who are affected. The recently renewed proposal to expand the airport and extend the runway by 1,000 feet to accommodate jets will absolutely create more noise and more pollution impacts throughout the community. If you want to learn what has happened to other communities in the path of aviation expansion, please read Take Back the Sky by Ray Andre. For years now, we've provided council with fact-based, credible evidence about the negative consequences of aviation expansion and the pollution. If I seem frustrated at times, it is because our dialogue feels like shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. We have polite conversations in which you are presented with facts and evidence that are ignored, and we march along, seemingly entranced toward the inevitable disaster of aviation expansion. You hold the power and influence to put us on a good path. And finally, environmental quality is the cornerstone of true prosperity, not expanding that airport. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Doris Ogden.
Thank you, Mayor Brian Bagley, I'm sorry, and council members.
Hey, you's okay.
Hey, you. And I'd like to know what you're drinking over there. You've got 3 cans that you're going to drink tonight.
It's beer. I like beer. No, just kidding. I don't drink beer. It's Coca-Cola.
Well, you don't have any trouble finding that around here.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm Doris Ogden, and I live at 3666 Oakwood Drive. I'm real close to what is called the Nelson Road Racetrack. But I'm not going to talk about that. What I want to introduce is our youth. We are having all these apartments built, and all these people will be moving in, and I imagine a third of the people that occupy these apartments are going to be children of various ages. And I think that we need another ice skating rink. We need a roller rink, maybe 2 of them. For the size of Longmont, we could probably use 2. Baseball parks and the staff to maintain the activities and safety and security of these facilities. I think that Longmont really owes it to the future of our young people to provide something besides TVs, streets to walk on, and I'm hoping that there will be quite a bit of money in the budget to provide some activities for our youth in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Ruby Bowman.
Mayor Bagley and council members, Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive. I have lived in Longmont for over 20 years. In years past, I often jogged along the St. Vrain River from Rogers Grove to South Pratt Parkway and back. I enjoyed these moments when I was near water among the trees and enjoyed seeing wildlife like coyotes, raptors, and prairie dogs. I instinctively knew the creek was a special place, but I didn't know how extraordinary it was until I came across a letter written in 2014 from CPW to Longmont. In the letter, CPW described the St. Vrain as having immense aquatic conservation value to the state of Colorado because of the rare native fish inhabiting the river within the city reach. Several of these species are state-listed threatened and state species of special concern. They are also listed as species of greatest conservation need in the State Wildlife Action Plan. St. Vrain River is also a wildlife movement corridor. It acts as a highway connecting areas of habitat and allowing wildlife to move between them, like bobcats traveling from the foothills to Sandstone Ranch. Boulder County, in its comprehensive plan, has designated the river as critical wildlife habitat. The St. Vrain is vitally important to wildlife species, and we should do our best to take care of it. It is important to keep urban development away from this precious resource in order to keep the river water clean for humans and wildlife. In the 2016 Water Quality Analysis report for the St. Vrain watershed, the river is listed on the EPA's list of impaired streams because of high E. coli levels during the recreational season, including in some areas within Longmont. Having a significant buffer of vegetation and decreasing the amount of impervious surfaces adjacent to the creek will help keep the pollutants out of the water. Noise pollution is also a real concern for wildlife in the corridor. A study done on impacts of noise pollution on birds found it causes chronic stress similar to post-traumatic stress syndrome. Rob Goralnik, a co-author of the study, said it makes it harder for animals to survive. We have a lot to lose as a community if we don't ensure the creek corridor is properly protected. Please keep the 150-foot setback as currently written in the Land Development Code and enact stronger riparian protection laws. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Lee Crisp.
Mayor Bagley and council members, my name is Lee Crisp. I live at 10650 North 75th Street. That address is directly west of the Longmont Airport. And I just felt like it was time for somebody to speak up for the airport. We've lived there for 35 years and we've enjoyed it. We sit out on our deck and enjoy the airplanes taking off, coming back in. We own horses. We've never had a problem with the horses being disturbed by the airplanes at all. When we first bring a new horse to the property, the first time an airplane goes over, they might jump a little bit, but it's never been a problem. They become desensitized to it right away. So I just wanted to give my support to the Longmont Airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Crisp. David Schultz.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and council members.
Can you get that microphone right up to your mouth?
So I certainly can.
Awesome, thank you.
For first-time attendee, bad public speaker, be prepared. My name is David Schultz. I live at 2112 Creekside Drive in Longmont. I am a victim of constant airport noise. I believe my house is approximately 2 miles downrange from directly a line from the end of the runway. I hear the noise from the skydiving planes constantly, and it bothers me deeply. I wish I had known the scope of that before I purchased the home there. When I heard that there was some sort of proposal in the works to expand the runway to accommodate jets and to increase airport operations, I basically blew a gasket. I think that any such change would have an extremely negative impact on a wide variety of citizens of the city. Any such change, I think, should be put to a referendum or something of that nature. In addition, if the city is actually paying taxpayer dollars to maintain the airport for these extremely noise polluting industries, I think that's just basically wrong. The comment that somebody made previously that the animals became used to the noise.
Could you get that mic? Yeah, just right up there.
The animals became used to the noise basically made me cringe. We shouldn't be forced into a position to accommodate something that is inherently a negative impact on quality of life. The city should be working to increase quality of life and not decrease it. So, you know, I understand the motivation to increase jobs and business and you know, grow the community, but I would say there are 1,000 different opportunities to do that that don't involve Harley Davidsons with wings flying over everybody's homes.
Bad analogy.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, Jeff Bowman.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Jeff Bowman, 6675 Secretariat Drive, Longmont. Does Longmont need an airport? Absolutely. Should the city invest in it? Of course. The notion that the current airport is not self-funding is nonsense. I have your numbers right here. The revenue generated by the airport substantially exceeds its operating cost every year. What obfuscates that fact is the way that Longmont allocates overhead against using methodology that business schools quit teaching over 25 years ago. In fact, without the airport, Longmont would have to find additional sources of revenue to help pay for your salaries. I run a Boulder-based business. We've hired over 20 new employees in the few years since I started there. Many of those folks, including myself, live in Longmont. I have a plane at the airport. Mostly it's used for personal transportation, but a significant use of it is for business. By way of example, I travel to Salt Lake City frequently. It takes me 2 hours and 30 minutes from the time I leave my house till the time I walk into the terminal at Salt Lake. I can go and leave whenever I want. That's extremely valuable to me as a businessman. My company primarily exports to China, Taiwan, Korea. You know how much personal air traffic there is in those countries? None. So when those folks come over here, taking them on a flight is a great tool to help close business deals. For those of you who aren't pilots, it's much like golf. Besides the numerous businesses located at the airport, there are many local people who use their planes to help create jobs and revenue. Oscar Blues and Smuckers are two prominent ones. Not to mention emergency medical flights, wildfire early detection staging, and flight training in an era when our country faces an acute shortage of military and commercial pilots. The airport is critical infrastructure for any community, never mind fast-growing, transportation-constrained ones like Longmont and Boulder County. The current airport does not serve the city's interest. Most business jet owners refuse to use it. They can't get fuel, they can't take off on a hot day, there's no safety margin. That is leaving significant revenue on the table and discouraging clean, responsible investment in Longmont. Our airport is not reflective of every other public utility in town. If you don't believe me, talk to your own development director. What do out-of-town developers have to say about that airport? I'm one of the people spearheading a volunteer task force to help the city develop a modern airport that will be largely funded by federal grants and private investment. We represent a broad coalition that's growing every week and plan to have a proposal ready for your consideration by the end of the year. It will require modest investment by the city. Do not deprive the residents of Longmont of that opportunity. Our vision is simple. Vance Brand Airport will become the primary business transportation hub for Boulder County, a national resource for the development of environmentally progressive
radiation. I'm going to have to cut you off. That was 3 minutes.
And general aviation.
But thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. And yeah, I forgot to tell everybody, I got to cut you off at 3 minutes, but thank you. All right, David Kopp.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Hey, happy haircut, Mayor. Sort of the same style I wear. Chopper pilot, been flying out of Longmont for 18 years. I bought 3 small hangars in the first few years, 2 for my aircraft, 1 for a rental on the south side. At Longmont, the airport land leases average about 3 times the hangar footprint for the hangars. In 2013, I noticed a hangar that had been for sale for 3 years and was not selling because the land lease was 7 times the size of the 4,000-foot hangar, 28,000 square foot. This was the worst ratio in the airport. I approached the airport manager about splitting the lease in half and making the other half of the property available for development. Agreements were reached, and I bought the hangar and began underestimating the cost to build another hangar on the remaining half of that property. The vacant property had power, gas, telephone lines in all the wrong places. And had to be relocated at my expense. It cost me $80,000 to extend or relocate the water, sewer, power, and telephone lines to the development site. Unlike the normal commercial or residential development, where all the houses or commercial units on the development would help fund that event. In Longmont, only 10% of the hangars have heat, 7.5% of them have water. So the likelihood that anybody else is going to help me on that is slim to none. But after I finished the hangar, 30 minutes after I finished the hangar, I rented the hangar that I built to the one of the largest businesses in Longmont. Made the business owner quite happy. I got about a 20-year payback on that investment. Not a great investment. Maybe it's a fair one. Certainly made the owner happy. The point of this story is the cost of the land lease and the infrastructure extension can be a deal breaker. With a land lease that is 3 times the hangar footprint, the cost of the lease is the same as buying the land under your hangar every year. Land around the airport still sells for about $1 a square foot or $40,000 per acre. The only reason this is a fair deal for the hangar owners is because it provides us access to a mile of runway, which will take us anywhere in the U.S., just as the interstate highways will. I can do it cheaper. I go 200 miles an hour at 35 miles per gallon. That's better than a Prius, and I get there a lot quicker. The U.S. government understands this and provides yearly funding grants for maintenance and growth of both our highway systems and our local airports. Not applying for these grant opportunities to help cover these costs can result in lower income for the city, little or no improvement at the airport, and even unsafe conditions at the airport because of deferred maintenance. The largest source of income from the airport is ground leases. Current rate is just over 35 cents a square foot, over $400K last year, 2017, and it'll be over that for 2018. Vance Brand receives more revenues than it expends and has for at least the last 4 years. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kopp. Sherry Malloy.
Good evening, Sherry Malloy, 2113 Rangeview Lane. I and several others are here to present postcards and petitions signed by hundreds of Longmont residents who value our St. Vrain Creek and the wildlife it supports. All value this amenity running through our city and want this corridor protected from encroaching and damaging development. As you know, 850 acres of privately owned property within the city reach was in the floodplain and not developable prior to the 2013 flood. After flood mitigation is completed, much of this land will be suited for development. Because of the huge public investment of our tax dollars, we, the public, want to ensure that any future development or redevelopment plans along this corridor meet better environmental standards. We understand our sister city, Northern Arapahoe representatives, were recently impressed with our St. Vrain jewel. We agree. First, we have bags of completed postcards to give you. Thanks, Rose. Most people filled out one to Mayor Bagley and chose either their ward rep or an at-large member to do the second postcard. These say, quote, please protect St. Vrain Creek and Longmont's other riparian areas by ensuring the 150-foot setback is maintained and by enacting stronger laws and policies as recommended in the Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek April letter to City Council. We are presenting Mayor Bagley with 308 postcards, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen with 77, Councilwoman Peck with 65, Councilwoman Martin 64, Councilman Rodriguez 75, and Councilman Waters 58, and Councilwoman Finley with 76. Together, the total is 724 postcards. We are also presenting petitions, 522 signatures on petitions. Some people signed both the postcards and some just the petition. The petition urges holding off on any development considerations at this time. It reads, quote, we, the undersigned, urge Mayor Brian Bagley and City Council members to protect Longmont's sensitive and important riparian areas from the intrusion of damaging urban development. Specifically, we want any and all considerations for development in proximity to St. Vrain Creek corridor to be put on hold until the following are in place. Number one, FEMA approves our new floodplain maps. 2, the Resilient St. Vrain project plans and funding are in place. 3, the Land Development Code update is completed for sections concerning riparian protection and wildlife management. Annette and Terry will now read the letter Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek presented to you in April outlining recommendations to be included in the Land Development Code updates. This letter was co-signed by 13 other local organizations. We hope you will direct staff tonight to include these recommendations as they are working on updates and revisions to the second phase of the Land Development Code. We urge that you do this now rather than as amendments later to expedite the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moy. All right, I'm kidding. It's Annette, you're up.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Annette Mongovan at 2213 24th Avenue in Longmont. My husband Terry and I will tag team reading this letter from Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek and co-signed by 13 local organizations. This was submitted to you on April 1st, 2018. Sherry has included a copy in your postcard bags. As the city of Longmont shifts its focus from development opportunities on the city margins to infill or redevelopment, the intrusion of urban development into riparian areas will intensify. Riparian areas serve a number of important functions, such as filtering runoff, slowing down floodwaters, and preventing erosion. In addition, while riparian areas are estimated to make up less than 2% of the area of Colorado, over 70% of species in the state depend on riparian areas at some point in their lives. The current update of Longmont's Land Development Code provides a timely opportunity for City Council to enact significant improvements to its regulations concerning the protection of Longmont's rivers, streams, wetlands, and riparian areas, as well as wildlife and wildlife habitat within the city. Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek and the signatories of this letter respectfully request the following be included in the Land Development Code in order to protect our creeks, streams, lakes, and reservoirs, such as St. Vrain Creek and Union Reservoir. The criteria for granting a variance for a reduced riparian setback are vague, ambiguous, and set a low bar for developers to obtain city approval to build within the 150-foot riparian conservation buffer. The criteria, as currently written, require a variance request to be consistent with a developer's proposal, but do not require that it be consistent with city plans to restore habitat for wildlife, aquatic species, and pollinators on St. Vrain Creek after flood mitigation efforts are completed. The criteria should be rewritten to eliminate loopholes and provide more stringent requirements that will effectively protect riparian habitat and movement corridors. Artificial lighting should be prohibited along Longmont's greenways, open space properties, and riparian corridors in order to protect nocturnal wildlife and maintain the ecological integrity of wildlife movement corridors. Light fixture shielding and vegetation buffer requirements should be established to minimize the impact of light and noise pollution from nearby development on greenways, open spaces, and riparian corridors. This is especially important along the St. Vrain, where the removal of vegetation has eliminated an important natural screen and sound dampener. Perfect.
Thank you, though. All right, now, Terry Mongovan, it's your turn.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Please allow me to continue reading of this letter to enact stronger riparian protection laws. Number 4, building heights should be restricted for structures built adjacent to riparian areas in order to keep the scale and profile of buildings from overpowering the natural setting of stream corridors. Number 5, the amount of impervious materials, for example, concrete sidewalks and parking lots, used in a development adjacent to rivers, streams, and other bodies of water should be kept small to a small percentage of the overall area of development. Impervious surfaces prevent infiltration of snow and rain and snow melt into the ground, resulting in polluted stormwater runoff draining into waterways. Number 6, the Planning and Development Services Director, not the development applicant, should retain a consultant with demonstrated expertise in the field to prepare the required habitat species conservation report for a development proposal. The applicant will reimburse the city for the cost of preparing the plan. And number 7, the city should acquire wildlife habitat adjacent to the riparian conservation buffer as open space or as a wildlife habitat, dedication in an annexation agreement to protect important wildlife habitat, including prairie dog habitat located outside the 150-foot buffer but contiguous with habitat within the buffer zone. Riparian areas are high-value habitat in terms of species richness and the high number of endangered, threatened, and special concern species present there. It is imperative that City Council be proactive and take immediate action to ensure the protection of these areas now and for the future habitat restoration efforts by implementing stronger regulations and honoring the intent of the current 150-foot riparian setback requirement. Thank you for your time and the consideration you will give to this matter. Respectfully yours, and these are the signatories of this letter, stand with our creek, our St. Vrain Creek, Boulder Rights of Nature, Boulder County Audubon Society, Colorado River Rights of Nature, Dark Sky Association, Colorado section, Endangered Species Coalition, the Foothills Audubon Club, Front Range Nesting Bald Eagle Studies, Prairie Protection Colorado, Save Our St. Vrain Valley, Save Union Reservoir, Sierra Club, Colorado chapter, Tin Can Dan, and Wild Earth Guardians. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir. Jamie Simo.
Jamie Simo, 525 East 16th Avenue. Thank you, Mayor Bagley, council members, and city staff for listening to us tonight and for the work you've already done to protect the St. Vrain corridor and Longmont's open spaces. In particular, I want to again thank council members Waters, who's not here tonight, and Rodriguez for their motions to make the city council the deciding body for development applications in proximity to St. Vrain Creek and other open space and natural area properties in Longmont. As public amenities available to all city residents, it makes sense for our elected officials to be the deciding voice on any developments that might impact those areas. I also want to thank the Longmont residents who were able to come out tonight to show their support for strengthening protections for the St. Vrain River corridor. Would those residents please stand? Thank you. You've heard from Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek many times over the past couple of years, but we thought it important for you to hear from us again now that the first phase of the Land Development Code update has gone into effect, and the second phase, which includes the update to regulations protecting rivers, streams, wetlands, riparian areas, habitat, and species, is soon to commence. As Sherry said, we ask that you direct city staff to include the recommendations in the letter read by Annette and Terry in the initial update of the second phase of the Land Development Code, rather than as later amendments. This will help expedite the completion of the Land Development Code process, which will be beneficial to both city staff and developers going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Joanne Burton.
Joanne Burton, 713 Snowberry, Mayor Bailey, and Longmont City Council members. You are all aware of the tale of the Emperor's New Clothes, written by Hans Christian Andersen. The end of the tale goes like this. No one would admit these much admired clothes could not be seen because, in doing so, he would have been saying he was either a simpleton or unfit for his job. But the emperor has nothing on at all, said a little child. Listen to the voice of the child, exclaimed his father. What the child has said was whispered from one to another. But he has nothing on at all, cried all the people. The emperor was upset, for he knew the people were right. So I ask you, what is the truth about mile-high skydiving that you choose not to see? What is the status of the code violations? Why are you not collecting the drop zone fees? Who is courageous enough to stand up and say the emperor has no clothes? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Tom Briggs.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Tom Briggs. I live at 701 Ryder Ridge Drive. I retired from the federal government in 2013 and moved to Longmont to be near my grandchildren. My career involved both domestic and international finance. At one point, I was chief financial officer for the city and county of Denver when Mayor Federico Peña led the replacement of Stapleton with Denver International Airport. I managed the financing of the first $400 million of the new airport's cost. We in Longmont today are in the middle of a long discussion about the future of our city's airport. That discussion has already or will include many arcane ideas and terms, including employment multipliers, positive economic externalities, negative externalities, landed weight limits, and a host of others. Those are all really interesting, but my focus is on how we actually live our lives and how our city provides services to its residents. With that in mind, I would like to offer a single simple idea tonight. One of my most memorable lessons learned during the years when we made the decision to build a new airport was the idea that an airport is a public utility, exactly like other public utilities. Local governments operate utilities for the convenience of citizens, to offer equal access to all, to provide for public safety, and to create economic opportunity. An airport should be viewed as just another utility, like, next slide, our city roads or our water and sewer system. I believe that keeping the perspective of the airport as a public utility in mind as we proceed with the discussion underway about the future of the airport will help us focus on the real issues we face as a community, particularly including increased economic opportunity for our fellow residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Keith Griffith.
Mayor and Council, my name is Keith Griffith. My address is 7066 Johnson Circle in Niwot. On September 15th, the Times Call published an article that described the current airport taxi lane project and stated that city funds of about $68,000 were used to support the project. This is an imprecise report because it is the airport fund that supplied this money, and the airport fund comes largely from the land leases that the airport tenants pay. No city general funds were used. This may seem like a minor detail to some, but the small wording error leaves the incorrect impression that the airport is draining city resources for this project when that is not true. The airport opponents may object that the $68,000 is only a small part of the total taxi lane cost and that federal taxpayer funds are being siphoned off for a special interest project. Well, they're half right. Most of the cost of the taxi lane does in fact come from the FAA through the Airport Improvement Program. However, the AIP grants are supported entirely by users of the aviation system nationwide through various taxes. No federal general fund revenues are appropriated to support AIP. And speaking of FAA AIP grants, there's a wealth of data publicly available on the state CDOT website. The best way to summarize that data is to express the grants in terms of dollars per capita over the 24-year span that's been recently analyzed. Admittedly, this is a rough measure, but the basic trend is undeniable. Here's a few sample numbers. And the higher the number, the more successful the city has been at supporting its airport. Longmont, $79 per capita. Boulder, $68. Fort Collins Loveland, $154. Greeley, $289 per capita. Erie, $242. Fort Morgan, $945. And lastly, my favorite little grant-winning powerhouse airport is Meeker at over $8,600 per capita over the 24-year span. So I think the inescapable conclusion is that for a quarter century, it has been seriously, Longmont has been seriously outplayed in the FAA grant game by our peers along the Front Range and even by much smaller players around the state. I would like to see Longmont up its game and be more successful at making its airport attractive to business aircraft. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Scott Stewart.
Here we go. Scott Stewart, 229 Grant Street, Mayor Bagley, members of council. Per capita, wow, that's good. Maybe it's because Longmont's thriving despite the airport. The $68,000 that we were just talking about is, I believe, what we're talking about is the credit that the city's giving for the administration transfer fee. It's actually not a direct payment towards the improvement, but as a gentleman had spoken earlier, Jeff, the airport makes plenty of money and it funds itself and it brings in, I heard some $400,000 numbers or whatever. Man, that's great news. Let's stop subsidizing their the fee that they're supposed to be paying to the city. Glad to hear they're able to do it on their own. Let's let them do it on their own. There's no doubt that the airport has the ability to grow. It can, it will, if we allow it. The question is, should it? Quality of life here is why I moved to Longmont. It's not because I want a quick flight out to Aspen or a quick flight to wherever. It's for quality of life. It's for the school districts. It's for the sense of community within my neighborhood. The impact on the airport that the airport has of those of those of us who own homes, the current impact is more than enough. The only protection that those of us on the ground have from the airport is a voluntary abatement program, noise abatement program. It's voluntary. And admittedly, if you talk to some of the gentlemen who are trying to expand the airport, and you know, I understand where they're coming from, the majority of the pilots and the hangar owners have not read that report. I've requested that, you know, put a sign at every entrance that says, "We fly friendly," volunteer, you know, noise abatement program. Add it to the top of the lease. It's not a binding thing. Just do it as an FYI so that everybody that's going into that airport understands that we need to fly friendly in this community. That voluntary noise abatement program is not enough. Lengthening the runway for the purpose of increasing air traffic, to me, it's just crazy. Planes circling the pattern on the weekend. When the pattern gets busy, they start circling wider because they can't be as tight as the pattern is supposed to be. You know, I'm not sure if these jets are going to be having to circle an airport, but I know they don't circle at the same radius that a regular prop plane does, which is already annoying enough. You know, God help us if we got to get jets that are actually circling the damn airport in order to wait to land. $40,000 an acre for 260 acres. What a deal.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Benston.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley and City Council. Strider Benston, 951 17th Avenue. One lady mentioned the Emperor's new clothes. I'll quote T.S. Eliot, "I will show you fear in a handful of dust." Bob Woodward just came out a week ago. 2 million copies out. People are beginning to figure things out. Three city officials spoke at the senior center this morning and gave us a very good presentation of the bond issues, the building we're in, the firehouses, and the golf course. I may dispute the propriety of the golf course side of it, but they gave very good presentation, good interchange, good response to questions, and that is the nature of democracy. But we are losing it. Our country is being absolutely taken away from us at this very moment, maybe this very week. It's beer. I like beer. Well, the person who is trying to get on the Supreme Court attacked a female United States senator last week, said, "Don't you get dead drunk?" You know, assaulted her verbally during the Senate hearings. And this is the kind of person that is trying to claim that stands for justice. They just found a letter he wrote. One really decent thing this guy Kavanaugh did, wrote a letter to his neighbors where, as a high school kid, he had enough money to rent a resort. And so he puts a letter out to the neighbors, and he said, "We're a bunch of loud and obnoxious drunks and professional pukesters. You better get 30 miles away and let us have our parties." And now he claims he doesn't party. He's been a professional choir boy all his life. And he signed that letter, Bart O'Kavanaugh, the exact same name that his buddy, Mr. Judge, used in his book, Wasted, about how this professional drunkster who used to beat up people all the time and assault women, it's in his book. But the FBI will not investigate that because they got handcuffs on, because the White House will not give them the directive to go and do a real investigation. We may have a consolidation of the coup taking over this country and destroying democracy this week. People wake up, call everybody you know that has any influence in Congress. This is deadly serious. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Benston. And last one, I saved you to last because you're Dale Van Zant says you're here to talk about the budget. Oh, Jeff Thompson? All right.
Mayor Bagley, council members, good evening. My name is Dale Van Zant. I live at 2976 Dunes Court here in Longmont. I'm the current chair of the city's Airport Advisory Board and in the 5th year of membership on that board. However, tonight I come to you as not as the chair of the AAB, but as the past chair of the 2018 Longmont Airport Aviation Expo. On June 23rd of this year, it was my privilege, really, to oversee a remarkable event that drew approximately 6,000 people, or about 6.5% of the Longmont population, to our 73-year-old airport. By any measure, the expo was a success. The pancake breakfast in a little over 2 hours earned $2,230 for the benefit of Jay Davis, a local pilot who is currently fighting large medical bills. The expo was free to all and attendees, but citizens filled 3 donation jars with $2,200 of donations in 1s and 5s and an occasional 10. We had designated parking for over 2,500 vehicles. They were all used, and we then used every available spot to put a car on the airport itself. All of the food vendors ran out of product. There were over 40 vendors, 6 food trucks, and representatives from the Longmont Police Department, Longmont Fire, Boulder County Sheriff. Citizens could speak directly to emergency and first responders and view demonstrations of their work. We had about 50 airplanes on the ramp. Every one of them had a pilot or an owner or both near and able to talk to the people there. Some of them allowed attendees into their aircraft. The theme of the expo was Planes with a Purpose. And we had firefighting equipment, rescue helicopters, animal rescue airplanes, aerial surveying airplanes, and former military aircraft available for everybody to see and discover. The success of the 2018 Airport Expo shows the wide support the airport enjoys from the community and was made possible by over 40 volunteers and their thousands, literally thousands of hours of service planning and helping at the event. The event was valuable on many levels. We were proud to offer Longmont citizens an opportunity to come to Vance Brand and see what's going on, to view and meet law enforcement and first responders in a positive environment, and to let them better understand that aviation and the Longmont Airport serve their needs in emergencies and at all other times. The airport budget appropriations truly benefit all of Longmont. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jeff Thompson.
Jeff Thompson, 1616 Sumner Street. The city manager says he needs final direction on the 2019 budget tonight. The city manager did not propose a budget until the end of August, so we've only had 1 month to study it. It's really huge. There's no way we could understand the budget in 1 month. There hasn't been nearly enough public input on that. We don't need a budget ordinance until the end of December, so we have 3 more months. Why is the city manager trying to rush this budget through before we have a chance to deliberate on it? Well, one answer is this. I prepared something for the city council, a handout, so you can all have it. And it's titled, Things They Don't Want Us to Know About the Driver of Next Year's Budget. The city manager says the driver is the Windy Gap Water Supply Project. Things the city council doesn't know. I can back up everything I say here if you'll slow down and really put some light on this Windy Gap project. What is the water supply now? The water supply now is 32,000 acre feet. What does the water supply need to be in accordance with our most recent planning effort? The answer is 22,000 acre feet, 10,000 acre feet less than we have now. Interesting question. How much will the Windy Gap water supply project add to our water supply? The city manager says 3,200 acre feet. Anybody who knows anything and has been studying this project as I have for the last 10 years know that it will not add anything to the water supply. It is a completely bogus project. All we'll get is a dust bowl out of that project. Why isn't the entire cost of this project being paid for by land developers and not utility customers as required by Chapter 14.05 of the Longmont Municipal Code? The answer is the city manager and his staff have deliberately sabotaged the requirements of Chapter 14.05 and misappropriated the funds that should pay for this project, forcing us, the utility customers, to pay for it. The city council doesn't know anything about this project, does not know anything about the water situation of this city, doesn't know anything about this project.
Thank you, Mr.
You need to
Thompson.
study it a lot more.
Thank you, sir. All right, that will conclude our public invited to be heard. Let's go on to study session items. Speak of the devil. Should we talk about some budget stuff? All right. No, we're good. How long are you going to be tonight? Not very, right? Yeah, let's just blaze through it.
It depends on you all.
Blaze through it. Want a donut? All right, we ready?
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Teresa Malloy, Budget Manager. And this is our final evening of our 2019 budget discussions. And I do have just a couple comments on information that we provided in the council communication that I wanted to go over with you this evening. Then we did advertise for a second public hearing. And I would recommend that you hold that if there is anyone left in the audience that wants to share anything with you before you all give us final direction. So let me go on with my comments here. So in attachment N, we included an overview of all of the funds that are included in our 2019 proposed budget. It also identifies the changes that I'm going to go over with you as well. And so the first of those changes is the reallocation of just a few expenses in our meter reading area. So our meter reading is split between electric, water, and sewer utilities. And the proposed budget included expenses for the compensation insurance, the liability insurance, and some fleet lease charges that was included 100% in the electric fund rather than being split based on the 60% electric, 30% water, and 10% sewer. And so this correction is really to correct those expenses and allocate them the way the rest of the meter reading expenses are. So this is a net neutral change to our budget in total, but it does move expenses out of the electric fund and into the water fund and the sewer fund. The second transfer, or the second correction that is for the warehouse transfers, and our warehouse is funded 100% in the electric fund, with offsetting transfers from other funds that utilize the warehouse. And we identified an error in the calculation of these transfers. The correction of this error results in an additional $23,432 of revenue to the electric fund, with an offsetting total expense, again, of $23,432 in the water fund, the sewer fund, the street fund, the sanitation fund, the golf fund, the broadband fund, the fleet fund, and the storm drainage fund. So again, this is from an expense perspective. This does not add any expense. It's really just allocating these costs based on the way they should be allocated. However, it does increase our overall budget because we've got to budget those transfers that were not budgeted appropriately in our proposed budget. And then the third item that I identified as a possible change to our budget is for the museum. And staff has been working with the museum staff, finance staff and museum staff have been working on identifying whether or not the city can meet Scientific and Cultural Facilities Districts, that's SCFD, Tier 2 qualifications. And in a minute, I'm going to have Kim actually talk to you about what that means and what benefits the museum will get from meeting a Tier 2 qualification. What we know at this point is that it will require us to change our 2019 budget. What we want to try to do is to stage our 19 budget such that we are able to meet these this Tier 2 qualification for 2020, for receiving these additional funds for 2020. And what we know is that we are going to have to move our museum expenses out of the general fund and segregate them into a separate fund. The museum special revenue fund, I think, is the fund we'll probably use for this. And so that's going to require that we change the proposed budget. In addition to that, we have also identified some ancillary charges, some administrative type charges that are particularly in the area of facility maintenance that supports the museum that can also be used to help us meet this Tier 2 qualification. And for those, rather than moving those expenses directly out of the general fund, what we are proposing will be some transfers. So we're going to it's similar to our administrative transfers that we do today. So we will identify what those charges are that help support the museum, and then we will do transfers to the from the museum services fund to pay for those services in the general fund, and transfer the revenue then to that museum services fund. So we're still working through all these details. We will, before you adopt this budget, we will have those details worked out for you, and we will bring those to you at that time. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim now to talk to you a little bit about what this means.
Thanks so much, Teresa. Good evening, Mayor Bagley and council members. As Teresa said, I'm Kim Manager. I'm the director at the Longmont Museum, and I'm so glad that Teresa explained all of that, because accounting is not my native tongue by any stretch. But here's what I know, is that SCFD was a sales tax that was passed in 1988, and it's essentially, it's a 1 cent tax for every $10 that's spent. SCFD distributes the funds according to a tiered structure, and institutions are assigned to one of 3 tiers based on their budget. We are currently in Tier 3, and historically in that category, we've received about $20,000 to $30,000 every year. If we're able to qualify for Tier 2, that revenue from SCFD actually bumps up to like $150,000 to $200,000. So it's a significant increase in the revenue that we would receive from SCFD. Our current budget actually meets the threshold for Tier 2, but it's really, really barely. And so the budget office has really been super, super helpful in trying to help us identify ways that we can make this more sustainable over time in order to be able to meet these requirements. And so I think that what we really just learned even today was sort of how those budgets need to be structured in order to be able to do that. So I'm happy to answer other questions if you have them, but that's what I know about how it would affect us.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Actually, I just have a clarifying question that I don't understand. When you get bumped up to a tier, does that money come directly to the municipality or does it go to the county? And you have to apply for it or the county distributes it? That's where I'm confused about that.
And you know what? I don't know the answer. I know that in Tier 3, it's distributed through the county. That we go to the county every year and do a presentation. For Tier 2, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I think Tier 2. I'm looking to Karen. The last time I went over this, I think Tier 2 may be direct.
That's what I think too.
But we will verify that and provide you. But when I remember going over this, that's also the important piece of moving into that next level because it's more of a direct interaction. But we will verify it. I may be wrong, but that's what my memory's telling me.
That's what I think too.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I do think this would be a very good investment for the city because it would help stabilize our status and our ability to fundraise. Our museum is an incredible resource, and we're trying to bump up summer programs and programs all throughout the year. And if we could get up a tier, that would be a wonderful thing for the city.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I agree with Councilmember Christensen that we're using the museum is a wonderful resource, beautifully running a lot of good programs for the city. That said, I just want to be sure that the money that the city contributes in order to get the museum budget into Tier 2 territory, it's got to come from somewhere.
I should probably clarify.
Yeah.
This doesn't add any money to our budget.
It doesn't?
No. It simply places it in its own discrete auditable fund.
Okay, so it is really not money that the city is taking from somewhere else in order to qualify.
As Teresa mentioned, it also will account for some of those expenses that are already being spent on the museum but don't appear in the museum's budget.
Mhm.
So that's where those transfers will happen. But ultimately, there's no additional funds that will go to the museum as a result of this.
Okay, thank you. I definitely did not understand that part.
In short, it's a structural and accounting change.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I think this is awesome. I am excited about it. I'm excited about the museum and you being our new director. And I think this will add a lot to our community. And it's just a simple fund transfer. Not simple for you, of course, but it makes sense. And I'm glad that you've thought of it, and I'm glad we're going forward with it.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Welcome.
Well, thanks.
Good job. Looking forward to getting into SCFD Tier 2.
Thanks for your help. I
All right.
appreciate it.
Anything else, Ms. Malloy?
I would also add that it may involve some code changes for our art and public places because we are using that program to meet this qualification as well. And so we may need to bring back some code changes, just adding some additional language in that art and public places code to indicate that it is part of this new entity that we will be creating.
All right, thank you.
So that is all we have for you this evening. And
Great. Before we call for a public hearing, I've got one quick, Dale? You're like, oh no, I tried to get your attention. And so my question is, once again, there were numbers flying about around the city's water needs. Question number one, how many acre feet of water do we have presently? What does staff think we're going to need at build out? And will we end up with zero from Windy Gap? And have you seen any indication that there have been misappropriations of funds to our private citizen, Harold Dominguez? He's not an elected official, and so I just wanted to clear up that.
Mayor Bagley and members of council, Dale Rademacher, General Manager, Public Works and Natural Resources. I apologize, I don't have all of those numbers on the top of my head.
Oh, yes, you do. Watch.
Well, suffice it to say that the raw water master plan that we completed in '04 and the updates to that we completed in 2012, the demand management study certainly showed that the current water supply is insufficient to meet the projected build out of the city of Longmont. I believe the number for build out is in the 30 to 40,000 range of acre feet. And again, I don't have the exact number.
But not 22.
No, not 22. And that Windy Gap will certainly provide supply to the city, which is what the firming project will complete and do. Obviously, the amount that will come to the city will be dependent on the participation level. If you're at 8,000 acre feet, I believe it's somewhere around 2,500 acre feet. It's about a 2.4 to 1 ratio. And that's firm water, meaning that is water that's available throughout the drought period, which is what you have to plan a water supply around. So with regards to any misuse of funds, I've been here for 35 years, and I can say that has never occurred. That would certainly be against any ethic that I would hold. And in fact, we have substantial funds that are in reserves that are intended to partially pay for that project that the city has been reserving in both the Water Construction Fund, the Water Operating Fund, and the Water Acquisition Funds. And so we can certainly, and there will be an opportunity. We're coming up to talk to City Council about the extension of the Windy Gap surcharge. That'll come up for first reading on the 9th and then second reading on the 23rd of October. That's the surcharge, by the way, that is charged to all new development in the city. So all new development is absolutely paying towards the Windy Gap project, as they have been since the mid-1980s. We will provide the council with a complete update, and we can add this kind of information to that presentation as well, which we would hope to make on the 23rd.
Thank you. So I sit here a lot of times and I hear a lot of comments through our public invited to be heard, and I rarely will, no matter how vile or mean, or everybody's allowed to talk, but I thought it was appropriate to basically say, as a private citizen, you were slandered, you were libeled, and there is absolutely no evidence, and there's only evidence to the contrary, that you act with integrity and honor, and the idea that you have somehow misappropriated funds is absolutely ludicrous. So I wanted to say that. Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I do want to reaffirm that I don't think there's any question of misappropriation of funds. I actually am not sure that was what the resident speaking said. I think he said that there had been a misinterpretation of the city charter. Oh, Mayor Bagley is correcting me.
The last sentence.
Yeah, he did say misappropriated funds. But I think what he meant was that it was a misinterpretation of what the city was and was not allowed to do, rather than that actual money was diverted from the public good into the private sector. So I did want to clarify that. I don't think anyone is trying to say that that happened. I do want to make sure that in the record is the definition of a firm supply. I want Mr. Rademacher to confirm that a firm supply is not like filling up a cup when you turn on the faucet. A firm supply is a matter of statistics, correct?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Martin, correct. That is a way of analyzing another way of saying it is the reliability of any particular water supply. And by firm supply, what we mean is a supply that is available during the 1 in 100 year drought, which is a drought that lasts for a period of 7 years, and has a certain intensity and drawdown on the flow of the river. And so that is what we mean by a firm supply.
Okay. And when, let's see, last summer, I guess, not this previous summer, but the summer before that, I asked Mr. Hewson what the probability of a compact call on the Colorado River was. And he said that that probability was about 1%. I understand that it's under discussion right now because of the drought on the western slope. So either we're in 1 in 100% or we're in a new era when compact calls happen a little more frequently. Does that affect the definition of the firm supply from Windy Gap in your mind?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Martin, I don't believe it does, and for a lot of reasons, is that the city looks at a very diversified water supply. If and when there is a call on the Colorado River, which I don't believe there's been a compact call. I think they have been able to manage it between the Lake Powell and Lake Mead water accounts over the past years to avoid any sort of a call. That isn't to say, however, that that is not possible. If you're all watching the weather these days, there is some pretty intense drought occurring as we speak, especially in southern Colorado and into the Four Corners area of the country. So I can't say that there will never be a call. When there is a call, and so put it in another context, it's really similar to calls that happen through our appropriation system as it is today. In other words, if there were to be a compact call on the Colorado, the most junior water rights would be the first ones that would be potentially impacted. My belief is that Windy Gap, the diversion of Windy Gap, could be impacted, and that would occur, and that would harm us most if we don't have a storage reservoir. Because if you have a storage reservoir, the whole intent of a reservoir, again, with a fairly junior water supply, which is what Windy Gap is that you take advantage of the flow during the high flow years, and you fill your reservoir, and you keep that reservoir during the dry period. And so if there's a concern, that's the greater concern in my mind, is that what is now just a direct flow water right could be interrupted if and when there were a compact call. But again, it's a complicated issue, because as Windy Gap diverts, it diverts right now in a very narrow window during runoff. So it will typically start to divert late April, May timeframe, and it's usually done by mid-June, which is the definition of a very junior water supply. And so even in a compact call, it would be unusual for that compact call to be occurring during runoff, if you're understanding what I'm saying.
Yes.
So there's other nuances that could come into play as to whether or not and to what extent it might impact Windy Gap.
Yeah. Of course, the firming only helps if you can fill the reservoir in the first place.
That would be correct.
So, yeah, and let me be clear, because I don't want anybody to be hysterical about Longmont's water supply. I think that Longmont has been very forward-looking in general on its management of its water supply. I don't have a lot of faith in Windy Gap, as I think everybody who paid attention knows. I do think we should be looking hard at the cost benefit of Windy Gap, but I don't think anybody should be getting scared about how much water Longmont has.
I think you're right. I agree with you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilwoman Martin and Director Rademacher, for a very informative little discussion about our water, which is a very complicated issue. I have a small and maybe odd question for Teresa, though. Going back to meter reading. So we spend well, anyway, we spend about $40,000 total on meter reading. Is that right?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Christensen, so what is in here, the $40,000 is just the additional, is the amount for the compensation insurance, the liability insurance, and the fleet lease. The overall meter reading budget is larger than that.
Yeah, right.
I'm looking at Kate back here, because I don't know that number off the top of my head, but.
My question actually is kind of simple, because I'm considering my future as a meter reader, and it seems to me that a lot of that has been automated, or we've been in the process over the last 10 years of automating some of that, so that people don't have to tromp through people's yard and hunt around for the water meter and all that. How are we doing with that? Is still a lot of that being done by people having to go around door to door and do that?
The automation is primarily occurring at this point on the water side. We are having conversations about that component on the electric side. And as I talked about with the LPC staff, is how does that match demand management, and what are we looking at in the future? And that, as you recall, is also tied in how we spec the new billing system. Yeah. So we're evaluating that piece, but we still have a lot of meters that they're going through.
I know,
on
including
a daily
mine.
basis.
Okay, I was just, looking for ways we could save, although I actually love having meter readers come around and all that. But okay, thank you.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Don't leave, but it's a really quick question. I'm just wondering if part of the financial restructuring is not in service of a potential alteration in the way we manage the electric meter reading that would come along in the future. In aid of? No?
This is not. This is directly related to the expenses. As we evaluate that, we will then be incorporating that piece into future budgets based on better data. I'm not quite sure where you're going on the question, but.
Hey, lots of budget changes aren't obvious, just asking.
Right. Now this is directly related to the expenses and allocating those expenses out to the appropriate funds. The work that we do when we talk about evaluating it in the future, that will come in future budgets as we present those to council.
All right, thank you. All right, this time let's go ahead and open it up for a second public hearing on the 2019 fiscal budget, the capital improvement plan, the pay plan, and the financial policies. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to say something? Sure, come on up.
Thank you for hearing me, Council and Mayor Bagley. My name is Kevin Zapp. I live at 1318 Grays Peak.
Get that mouth up there, right
Sorry
in
about
there.
that.
There you go.
I'll try to talk louder. I'm a little quiet.
It's all right. Can we start the time, please, City Clerk? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I've been looking over the budget. Appreciate all the hard work you guys are putting in, all of you, because I know you guys are studying it all the time, and so I think you need to work on the attorney's salary. I think he was wearing the same shirt last week when I was here. So
you may I promise we'll get right on that. Utmost priority. Yeah.
So I don't know. So I really appreciate it. It seems like this city is an amazing place to live. We have such a great community with people that help each other out, and when people are in times of crisis, which happens sometimes to all of us, I'm sure. So we have these great organizations like Hope and they're in our center, and I just think we have a lot of support here for any of the underprivileged or poor people or disabled people. A lot of programs. It's just a great place to live in that way. And so based on that, I had a concern, and it was actually brought up in the Times call, and that's the only reason why I know it. I looked over the budget, and I could not find it in the budget. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's not in the budget. But they mentioned about $120,000 that were going to be set aside out of the funds, general funds. 20,000 was going to be set up to provide a system to give back funds to the elderly and the handicapped and that. And I just don't think that's something that the city should start. I just think that these people get so much support if they can't afford to pay the grocery tax, the 3.53% of their grocery bill, that they can go somewhere and get help, because that's not the problem. It's the whole grocery bill that's the problem. And so they go somewhere else, they get free groceries, they don't even pay the tax. So I just don't see why the city's gonna set up a whole new program to give back money when it's really not needed. $340 a year if you buy $200 of groceries a week is what you're talking about. And that's not gonna help somebody that's in a desperate place. So I think they have plenty of other places to go, and I don't think the city should get into a place where they're giving back money. They need to be more efficient. I mean, they're very good, but providing more efficiency and bringing down a tax itself would help everybody, and not just the poor, and give us more money to help the poor. So I had to come up and talk to you guys, and I really appreciate your listening.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, with that, then we will go ahead and close the second public hearing on the budget. And I don't see anybody in the queue, so I'm going to go ahead and move that we provide final direction to city staff that they proceed with the council 2019 budget, the 2019-2023 capital improvement plan, the 2019 pay plan, and the 2019 financial policies as they have been presented over the past several months, so that staff may bring back the associated ordinances and resolutions necessary to adopt the 2019 budget. Shall we vote to give you direction? Let's vote. That passes unanimously, with Mayor Pro Tem maybe voting late, but I'm pretty sure she voted with us, right? All right, yep, that passes unanimously. All right, do you have anything else that you need from us, Harold?
Could I just make a really quick comment?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes.
So the ordinances that you will see next week are the ordinances to set our mill levies. The actual budget ordinances will then come to you for first reading October 23rd and second reading November 13th.
Okay, great. Can't wait. All right. Let's move on to mayor and council comments. We've had some late ones. Let's go home early tonight. Anybody? Mayor Pro Tem?
I just wanted to say that we've had a very tough few weeks in this city for violence. I mean, 2 really terrible incidences. And this is all weighed on the police department. And last Saturday, the police department had something at Ziggy's called Coffee with a Cop, which I thought was a wonderful event. It's done totally different from the way our city council Coffee with Council is. That the police, a whole lot of police, just gathered at Ziggy's and talked to people one-on-one. And I think that's a very good opportunity for people to actually understand how thoughtful our police force is, and maybe understand what the police, how much the police and the fire department and the emergency services are dealing with, and get a chance to know what really decent and great folks we are lucky to have working for us. And that goes for Jeff Satter and Dan Amon and Mike Butler, of course, as well, who lead it. Thank you.
All right, that comment has been seconded. Yeah, yes, yeah. All right, nobody else is in the queue. I just want to say good job to city staff for, you know, what's been presented. It's extremely boring, and I can only imagine what it would be like actually working with these numbers to prepare what we have seen. And so good job on accuracy and pushing through, and you can just tell that you guys do a great job. And then also just a random comment, I'm often struck by comments online, or the Times Call has the little, you know, the anonymous section and the blurb, or, you know, you'll hear people around town, and I don't know what you guys are talking about. We live in a fantastic city. I mean, I have the resources to live anywhere, and I choose here because it's awesome, and we're lucky. You don't see people clamoring to live in other cities, showing up, insisting on staying here because I belong. It's just, Longmont's awesome. And some people in our community need to just open their eyes and just see how beautiful the people and the environment here is. It's just like no other place. I love Longmont. So that's my only comment. I love Longmont. All right, I don't see anybody else in the queue, so let's go on. Harold, anything?
No comments other than we do love this numbers in the process, so it's exciting.
You do love the numbers? Oh, yes,
exciting.
exciting. Good job, Harold. Job security. Good job. Eugene, do you have anything to say?
No comment, Mayor.
All right, with that, let's go home.